was genuinely scary. It's like nasty, disgusting poetry. The drama in this book was 10 out of 10.
In this video, I will be discussing the 8 best books that I read in the month of November, starting with my favorite book of the month, which was Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. I loved this book so much. Clearly, this is one of Agatha Christie's most famous works. It's had several film adaptations, and I totally get it now. I get the hype. This book was fantastic. The drama in this book was 10 out of 10. Sometimes I have a hard time following Agatha Christie's very large cast of characters, but I really I didn't like the characters in this book, but I found them very interesting, not so hard to keep track of. They all had a very distinct personality to me. I honestly feel like this book completely reinvigorated my enjoyment of reading Agatha Christie books, and it really re-inspired me to want to continue reading her backlist, because I've had quite a few Agatha Christie flops recently. I just feel like this has set me back on track, and I'm excited to keep reading from her. I loved this book. This was a 5 out of 5 star. It was my favorite book I read this month. The next best book I read in November is The Troop by Nick Cutter. This book was absolutely wild. It is a book I've been wanting to read for the absolute longest time because everybody raves about this book. Everybody talks about how it's so dark, it's so gross and disgusting, and I wanted to know, what did that entail? I rated this book a full 5 out of 5 stars, and I was so extremely impressed with Nick Cutter's writing in this book. I feel like this book is a lesson in how to write horror. It's so gross, it's so disturbing, but constantly throughout reading this book, I was like, wow, I cannot believe how accurately he described this thing that I could almost feel it or taste it or see it or smell it. Evoke such a feeling for the reader that it truly did affect you to your core. I really almost feel like his writing in this book is like poetry. It's like nasty, disgusting poetry. Although I do want to say, there are major trigger warnings in this book for very intense animal cruelty, and that is a pet peeve of mine. I do not like reading violence against animals in anything. So I would say if that is also a trigger warning of yours, you may want to steer clear of this one. But I still ended up rating this book a full 5 out of 5 because I really feel like he did something very special with his writing in this book. The next best book of the month was Mother-Daughter Murder Night by Nina Simon. This was a super fun book. I rated this one a 4 out of 5. In A Mother-Daughter Murder Night, we're following 3 generations of a family of women. There's the grandmother, the mother, and then the daughter. One night, there is a body that turns up very near their property. They all kind of get involved and pulled into this murder investigation. And I loved following all of their 3 different perspectives, especially the grandmother. She was my favorite. This was a really good, wholesome, feel-good mystery that I really enjoyed. I honestly would really love to purchase a copy of this book for my shelf and reread it one day. I feel like this book honestly read just like a movie. And it's so interesting too because this book does have that Reese's Book Club stamp on it. I hope Reese Witherspoon does turn this into a movie because I would love to see it. The next best book I read in November was The Adirondack Witch by Patrick Reuman. Oh, I loved this book so much. I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars, but I have to say I really enjoyed reading it. This book was genuinely scary. I feel like it's just because of the trope that it plays into. In this book, we are following 3 friends who set out on a mountain hiking adventure. Things do take a very quick and sinister turn when they are forced to camp for the night at the mountain's dark peak. any sort of lost in the woods stories absolutely terrify me. I think it just takes me back to watching the Blair Witch Project when I was probably too young to see that movie, and it's really scared me when I was a kid. Any story like this still scares me to this day. And I just imagine myself like lost in the woods, it's dark, and there's all the silhouettes of the trees, you hear weird sounds out there and you don't know what it is, and you think, well, there's probably a murderer out there. That's what I was getting from this book. I was seeing myself in the story with these characters. It gets super weird and unhinged by the end of it. So if you are into very strange, weird, speculative, almost cosmic horror fiction, I would really recommend you this book because it gets very strange towards the end of it. And this is another one that I think would make such a good movie because I can see some of that imagery towards the end of this book just coming to life on the screen and being terrifying. The next best book I read was The Mystery of the Blue Train by Agatha Christie. This is the 6th book in the Hercule Poirot series. You absolutely do not have to read it in the order that it was published. You can read them pretty much in any order you want, except for the final book. I would say you would probably want to read that final book last. This is one that did have a bit of that issue that I talked about with Death on the Nile that I sometimes find in Agatha Christie books, where there are a lot of characters in a lot of different perspectives that we get introduced to really fast, and I have a very hard time keeping everyone straight. I did rate The Mystery of the Blue Train a 3-star. There's this very foreboding atmosphere that Agatha Christie is like building and sort of like ramping up as everybody is boarding this train, and we are like kind of like flipping through the perspectives of everybody as they're boarding. And some of the characters have this very dark, black, ominous feeling that something bad is going to happen, and they wish they could go back and not even get on this train. And I just love atmosphere like that. I love foreshadowing. I love when authors are able to build up that tension, and I was definitely getting that from this one. I also, again, I love Poirot. I always find him to be so charming, so likable, and so I really enjoyed this one. The only thing I will say is I don't know if I totally understood the ending, as in the whodunit aspect. Once we got to that wrap-up reveal, I don't know if I could say I totally understand who the murderer was. It was a 3-star for me. I enjoyed it, but was it my favorite? No, it was not. I was so curious after reading that one to see how similar it was going to be to Murder on the Orient Express. And, okay, I know that Murder on the Orient Express is, again, one of Agatha Christie's most hype works, similar to Death on the Nile. And unfortunately, this one did not live up to the hype. Did not love this one as much as I wanted. I honestly feel like this story was pretty tedious. Because this book takes place, once again, on a train, I felt like there was just so much of this book where we're following Poirot, moving all about this train, talking to every single passenger on this train. The ending is very, very, very different and special. And anytime you have something that's very different and special, it stands out, it stands the test of time. So I can understand why this is such a hyped book. I can appreciate what she did and why this book is so hyped, but I don't have like super fond feelings towards this one just because it was such a tedious reading experience for me. The next best book I read was The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson, and I absolutely ended up falling in love with it. I totally get it why now. It is so hyped across BookTube. So I love that I read this book. I love that it was young adult, and I love that this is an example of a young adult book that is so highly elevated. The way that it explores racism in our society, how not all racism is very evident and in your face and easy to see, but there are more subtle and sinister kinds of racism in our society that are very real and alive. There's just so much subtle commentary in this book, and I loved it. The final book I am here to talk about is Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. I love these sort of like Agatha Christie style murder mysteries. This was another, and it was a very fun addition to the genre. I rated this book a 4 out of 5 star, and there were times when I wanted to rate it higher, and there were times when I wanted to rate it lower. Now, I absolutely loved Vera's POV, and Vera is the character you see on the cover. She is our main character. She owns a tea shop, and one day in her shop, a man comes in and he dies right on the floor of her tea shop. And the police come in, they collect the body, and Vera starts investigating because she believes this man was murdered. Similar to mother-daughter murder night that I spoke about earlier, it was a very similar archetype character that we see. I feel like we get more and more of these every year with these amateur sleuths, and I love them. I can't get enough of them. If this book had only followed Vera's POV for the entire book, this would have been a 5 out of 5 star, a favorite book of the year. I would have sat here and raved about this book to you guys for like 20 minutes because I loved Vera. She was fun, charming, interesting, cute, funny, and then we had to flip character perspectives, and we flipped to some characters that I really did not like, that I did not enjoy reading about. I did not like that. I wish we could have just followed Vera's perspective. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I also feel like if you love descriptions of food, you would really enjoy this one. Different things that Vera cooked throughout this book, and that is something that Vera loves, is cooking for people, and everything that she cooked in this book sounded so good. That was all of the 8 best books that I read in the month of November. If you are interested in hearing me talk about more of my favorite books, I did recently put out my list of my best of 2023. If you want to know my best books that I read in the entire year of 2023, make sure you check out this video next.